Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Improve Business Agility by Moving SAP Workloads to the Cloud. My name is David Milam. I'll be the moderator and one of the speakers for today. I lead oil and gas solutions globally for AWS, and my background is in production operations and supply chain. Previously, I also worked for SAP, where I led business analytics, and I'm based in Austin, Texas. More importantly, we have Jeff Forrest with us today. Jeff is the enterprise architect at BP, and Jeff is located in London, England. Hey, Jeff, I've been looking forward to this chat all week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, David. You're welcome. Looking forward to the webinar, and I hope everyone finds it interesting and useful.
Great. So just to remind everyone, the purpose of today's webinar is to discuss how enterprises are modernizing their SAP implementations and extending those business processes. This is not going to be a technical deep dive infrastructure discussion. If you want to have that chat, that's great. Just send us a message in the question pane and we'll follow up with you via email. So let's go ahead and get started for today. To begin with, I wanted to show some areas where we're helping our oil and gas customers innovate in across their value chain by leveraging the AWS Cloud. So for example, in upstream, we're helping them monitor well conditions and transition to management by exception operations strategy. We have midstream customers that are using machine learning to do things like forecasting or spotting pipeline leaks. And in downstream, we're helping customers use IoT for predictive maintenance and video analytics, for example, to improve environment, health, and safety, EH&S. And depending on how SAP is deployed throughout your enterprise, each of those examples could be using SAP to automate those particular business processes. And because of the widespread adoption of SAP throughout the enterprise, many of our customers, like BP, begin their digital transformation journey by moving SAP workloads to the cloud. And there are typically a couple drivers which cause customers to begin that journey. And so let's take a quick interactive poll so we can get your thoughts. Maybe I should have warned you, there will be audience participation in this session. So go ahead and select one of the answers for those of you who are just on the phone. I'll read that question. What do you see as the drivers of moving SAP workloads to the cloud? Number one, pressure for business transformation. Number two, accelerating technology change. Third is constrained budgets. And fourth is non-HANA support deadline for 2025. So it looks like most of the results are in. The top response was pressure for business transformation. We hear that a lot. Obviously, the business partners throughout the enterprise are hungry for more flexibility and support in some of those key areas that we talked about on a previous slide: operations, supply chain, safety, for example. Next highest was accelerating technology change. I think we're in a great time with new technology advances like microservices and DevOps that really enables our technology to be much more flexible and adaptable to change. Also, looks like some pressure around the non-HANA support deadline of 2025. So people are starting to think about that. That's not going to be that far away. And the good news is constrained budgets don't really seem to be that big of an issue. So that's great. So now that we understand the drivers for moving SAP to the cloud, I'd like to get your input on any of those constraints or challenges to the cloud adoption plans. So if we could go ahead and start answering that second question. Again, for those of you on the phone, the barriers to constraining your cloud adoption plans for SAP: number one, long project cycles; number two, rigid and costly infrastructure; third is IT capacity; and fourth is customized SAP applications. Okay, it looks like many people have voted now. So pretty overwhelmingly, the concern is customized SAP applications. You know, I know when I was at SAP, many of our customers did, you know, want to extend the application and to tailor it for their specific needs. That we hear that a lot. That is a big risk, and we'll address that going forward around some of the ways we've been able to help customers address that risk. The other areas were all three pretty equal. So IT capacity is a concern. Any type of change in an infrastructure obviously requires significant IT assistance. The long project cycles, you know, logistics around buying the hardware, waiting for it to arrive, and integrating that is always a constraint. And then just a rigid infrastructure. So managing data centers across the globe is obviously expensive and time consuming. So great, thank you for sharing that information. That'll really help Jeff and I tailor the remainder of the presentation to those points. And one of the things that I wanted to talk from a background standpoint is that SAP and AWS have a long history together. We've actually been partners for over a decade. Ever since SAP became an AWS customer back in 2008, our two organizations have been working very closely to optimize and certify our cloud platform to run SAP applications. And because of this, AWS has more experience than any other cloud provider in running SAP, and have heavily invested in our infrastructure, as you can see on the left, to innovate and currently have the largest certified cloud native memory instances available for SAP Hana. So currently we have Amazon EC2 12 terabyte instances available now, and we've also announced 16 and 24 terabyte instances coming out later this year. And as I mentioned, SAP is a AWS customer and uses AWS services to deploy and develop their platforms as a service, like SAP Cloud Platform and HANA Enterprise Cloud, as well as they run their SaaS applications on AWS. So things like Concur, SuccessFactors, and Hybris. So together we've helped thousands of customers with moving SAP to the cloud, and we found typically there's three starting points where customers begin. So those three approaches are migration, modernizing, and then extending. Typically the first thing customers evaluate is a migration. That's best if customers aren't ready to move to S/4HANA, but they still want to take advantage of the cost savings and agility benefits of moving to the cloud. So customers can simply lift and shift their systems as is, or they can also change the database to either HANA or ASE, SAP Adaptive Server Enterprise, to save even more money. BP chose that later approach. And we worked with SAP to develop the SAP Rapid Migration Test Program, which enables customers to test a migration from a non-HANA to a HANA database on AWS in only 3 to 4 days. A second approach for customers is to modernize their system by moving to S/4HANA. AWS has system integration partners that have developed accelerators for that, or if you want to build and deploy it yourself, we've developed the AWS Quick Start for SAP HANA, and that guides you through the process to deploy a fully functional HANA system on the AWS Cloud in about an hour with only a few clicks from our website. And I feel that those approaches really highlight the key advantage of the cloud, the ability to quickly and easily test different options using your actual SAP system data to see if moving to S/4HANA is really the right decision for you right now and for your enterprise. In the past, that's been very difficult to do because of the rigid infrastructures that we talked previously, those upfront hardware costs and lead times. But now with AWS, you can spin up a new system on demand, test it out, make sure, for example, that any of those areas that you've extended or customized are not going to cause any issues, and then shut it down with very little impact to cost or IT resources. And finally, the third area is to extend existing SAP business processes by leveraging new AWS services like IoT or video or robotics or machine learning, for example, to automate that strategy to execution loop and gain a competitive advantage. So actually customizing those processes outside of SAP. And we have customers taking this approach both with SAP implementations in the cloud, as well as customers using their on-premises implementations of SAP that they haven't yet moved. So I get really excited about the potential for innovation in these areas. So let's dive a little deeper into some examples that we're working with SAP and some of our customers. And this approach to extend SAP processes can create what I call a data flywheel effect for customers. The first step is to collect all the silos of data relevant to one of the company's core business processes into a data lake. So that would include SAP data, which can be attained using tools like the SAP Data Hub, or there's also third-party partner adapters that AWS has, as well as non-SAP data. So that could be SaaS applications your business is using, along with operational data sources. So SCADA system data or historian data, for example. And once that data is available in a common repository, then tools like machine learning can be used to analyze that data to predict potential issues before they can occur, and then also to prescribe actions to effectively resolve those issues. And then those actions can be triggered back for execution. AWS Lambdas are functions that are serverless rules that can trigger actions through the AWS API gateway. And then they can be executed back either in SAP or in third-party applications to close the loop on that flywheel. So some of the examples and use cases that we've identified with our customers include production operations. So for example, if there's an IoT event, you may want to use that data to either create a new work order in SAP or to update an existing work order. We have customers using drones for inspections. Again, that could then update the appropriate work order. A lot of interest around environment, health, and safety, video inspections, so cameras, for example, to monitor work conditions, or also we have customers monitoring flare stacks for emissions and making sure they're still burning. Those could then create a safety ticket in SAP or voice requests. So as employees are doing safety walkarounds and looking for unsafe conditions, or if they're driving down the road, then voice commands can be used as well to update those processes. And finally, around supply chain, we get a lot of interest from oil and gas customers in the retail space around the just walk out technology that we leverage at the Amazon Go stores, and also around MRO. So things for ordering spare parts for through Amazon Business for consumables. We have one refinery in particular that spent over $1 million in the last year just on MRO through Amazon Business. So I'd like to get your thoughts on these business processes and use cases as well. I promise you this is the last poll that we're going to take today. But the question is, which SAP business processes would you prioritize extending with new digital services such as IoT, video, robotics, drones, voice, and machine learning? So the options are health, safety, and environmental, production operations, predictive maintenance, and supply chain. So it looks like by far the winner is predictive maintenance and repair. I love that use case. I used to be a reliability engineer. I think there's a lot of value around predictive maintenance, especially in industries like oil and gas, where you have very remote operations, particularly in upstream and midstream. Supply chain was next. That's also an area that also ties very closely to predictive maintenance around spare parts and procurement, obviously. Production operations, so more condition monitoring is an example. I'm actually a little surprised there wasn't more safety and environmental interest. We are seeing a fair number of requests around that area. Most of them around using video analytics to look for changes in site conditions. So those could be leaks or also emission clouds, for example. So thank you very much for this information. This will help us prioritize writing some blog posts where we can demonstrate to you of how to build these extensions yourself. If you can't wait and you want to see some demos in that area, we have a great presentation from the AWS reInvent conference in November. You can find that on YouTube just by searching Beyond Infrastructure for SAP on AWS. And one of our solution architects does show real live demos in these use case areas. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Forrest so he can provide an overview of BP's journey of running SAP in the cloud. Hey, Jeff, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, David. Hi all, great to have you on the webinar today. As David mentioned, my name is Jeff Forrest and I'm an enterprise architect in BP where I've worked for nearly 10 years. These days, I'm responsible for the architecture of BP SAP systems, both on-premise and in the AWS cloud. Today, I'd like to talk about what benefits BP achieved by moving our SAP systems into the AWS cloud. So this is a timeline of our SAP journey to the cloud. BP have been customers of AWS for some time. As you can see from the slide, our first SAP deployment was in 2014 with an SAP sandbox. In 2015, we did our first cloud deployment of SAP Hana. It was a proof of concept for an analytics system. Then in 2016, that proof of concept went into production, and following that, we undertook the migration of an existing SAP system from one of our data centers into the AWS cloud. That first migration was a success, and the following year, we successfully migrated 4 more systems until we had 5 production SAP systems and their associated test systems all running live productively in AWS. By the end of last year, 2018, we'd migrated 28 production systems, and this year we are planning to migrate the remainder of our SAP estate and begin to take further advantage of native cloud capabilities. So we've seen a number of benefits of moving our SAP systems to AWS. So we've seen benefits in innovation and efficiency. We've been able to trial new technology with low upfront investment, like that initial analytics POC. We managed to simplify things. We've taken advantage of the move of the cloud to greatly simplify our architecture. We can scale our systems. We have flexibility in system sizing by scaling up or down and out or in. We can manage our costs more closely, and we can make the most of our budgets. And finally, by evergreening, by leveraging the evergreen nature of the Amazon platform, we can reduce the pain when hardware reaches the end of its service life and needs to be replaced. So I'm going to dig into those in a little bit more detail on the following slides. So to talk about innovation and efficiency, now the Amazon platform has a lot of features that we can consume rather than building them ourselves. So for example, AWS have quick start templates, and I think David talked about these earlier. These allow us to deploy complete SAP systems very quickly, and we typically use this for prototyping systems or for proof of concepts. As new hardware is released by AWS, we can quickly take advantage of it because of the virtual platform. So typically the newer hardware, the newer generations are faster and cheaper for an equivalent footprint, so it's a double bonus. We can test new technology on the platform relatively easily. We can pay on demand, so there's minimal upfront investment. We've developed a standard platform for our BP SAP systems in AWS. So by having that standard platform, we can accelerate our migrations, and we continuously develop the platform as AWS and SAP release new features. And by using automation, we can increase self-service for system builds, and we can make our deployment very quick and also consistent, which is very important. Now, this is incredibly important. I think this is one of the best things that we've achieved. So in terms of simplification of the number of vendors we have directly in the SAP stack. So in our on-premise architecture, we took a best of breed approach, and we ended up with components from a lot of vendors in the stack. So this led to quite a lot of complexity in operations. If we wanted to patch, we had to make sure that all component versions were compatible. If we saw issues, we had to engage multiple vendors to work on solving the problem. If we had a performance issue, that might involve bringing together teams from applications, operating system, database, hardware, and storage, all separate teams. In AWS, we were able to reduce those number of vendors from 8 down to 2. So essentially just down to SAP and AWS. And that's a massive simplification in operations and maintenance, as well as reducing cost. Let's talk a bit about scaling. So systems don't have a consistent workload. We might see spikes at period end or during maintenance activity. So with the ability to start infrastructure on demand or resize hosts, we can change the size of the system relatively easily, and we can deal with those changes in workload. Another great example is during migration. So we can throw a very large, powerful server in the fastest storage at a database transformation, and that can reduce the migration window. And then we can resize the servers and storage back down to reduce costs for normal operation. So for one of the larger systems we're moving this year, our initial timings were for a week-long outage, but with larger hardware and tuning, we've reduced that down to under 24 hours, and we're working to improve on that further. Cost management. So the cloud vendors work at a massive scale. This does create levels of efficiency, and that does reduce costs, and people are always very, very interested on the cost of infrastructure in cloud. But it's important to understand that although there are probably some savings in infrastructure, the majority of savings that you do get in the cloud are in the time to execute. So by enabling more self-service, by not having handoffs to different teams with SLAs, and then generally it might be a slow response, project life cycles can be a lot shorter. On top of that, because cloud pricing is all publicly available, there are tools you can use to make cost estimation much easier, so you don't have to worry about getting quotes from vendors, having to wait for them to come back, and then start to collate those into a cost. You can just use the online tools and get costing much easier, much faster. Now, a word of warning here: it's fantastic that it's so easy to stand up infrastructure quickly, but that infrastructure does have to be paid for. So cost governance is key, and there are many tools that will help with this, both from Amazon themselves and from third parties. Evergreening, this is another key thing that you get in the cloud. So historically, a lot of SAP projects have been driven by end of service life, most frequently of the hardware. And what that's meant is that every 4 or 5 years, you're building a new set of infrastructure, new servers, new storage, redeploying your SAP systems on it, quite possibly with a software and operating system upgrade at the same time, lengthy periods of performance and functional testing, especially if you change the IP addresses of the systems. So this was improved to some extent with virtualization, but in the cloud, it gets easier again. So in many cases, you can move to a new hardware generation just by shutting down the system, changing the hardware type from a drop-down box, and then restarting it. Depending on the system architecture and the DR design, it might even be possible to keep the system online while you do that hardware change. Note, however, sometimes the system does need patching to enable new hardware features. So those first systems that we deployed in AWS a few years ago, they've been through 3 generations of AWS hardware, and that's been a very easy transition for us. That's a massive benefit of being in the cloud. It's also worth noting that we can make storage changes online, so we can resize volumes, we can move to faster storage online without taking the system down. That's something on-premise we would probably have taken an outage for, so we're improving our uptime as well. So that was actually my last slide. To summarize, BP have achieved many benefits in moving our SAP systems to the cloud. So thanks for your time, and I'll now hand back to David, and I think we're possibly going to take some questions.
Yeah, Jeff, hey, thanks for sharing your journey. You did a great job of talking about the benefits, so I'll just quickly summarize those. TCO, you mentioned that what our customers typically see is between a 25 and 50% TCO reduction through the flexibility of having an on-demand infrastructure and only paying what you use. Minimizing risk and improving security is another key benefit. Security is job number 1 here at AWS. And Gartner has a study that says public cloud workloads will have at least 60% fewer security incidents than those compared to on-premises data centers. And we have many customer case studies where CIOs state they believe they're more secure running on the AWS cloud than when they were previously in their own infrastructure. And the last point's around accelerating innovation. So by freeing up your IT team, they have time to work with the lines of business and extending the value of SAP around those use cases that we talked earlier. We have many more SAP oil and gas case studies on the AWS website that you can check out. Gulfmark Offshore, Pacific Drilling, Sumitomo Chemicals talks about the refining operations. So it's just not the super majors like BP that are achieving these benefits. Also, AWS has a cloud economics team that can help customers build business cases for their companies. So if that's something that you're interested in, just engage them through your account executive. And one of the questions I get often is, why should we use AWS? And I think there's really 3 key reasons that how AWS helps customers innovate faster. So the first is that AWS simply has the most cloud experience. AWS launched in 2006. We created the category for cloud infrastructure. And according to Gartner, We have the largest infrastructure as a service market share, which is more than 4 times the size of the next 4 providers combined. Couple that with us having the longest partnership with SAP, we've learned lessons from hitting milestones and scales that other vendors just haven't reached yet. We also have the broadest and deepest cloud platform. Gartner again ranked us at the top of the infrastructure as a service magic quadrant. Last year, we launched over 1,430 new services and features here at AWS, including, as I talked before, having the largest in-memory instances available to optimize Hana performance. And finally, we have a dedicated team of oil and gas SMEs. This is something that most people aren't aware of, is the oil and gas team that we have. And we have a global oil and gas leadership team. And that team develops our strategy, our roadmap, and supports our key customers. In addition, every region has field resources with oil and gas technical experience in areas like HPC and field automation, machine learning, geoscience, reservoir engineering, trading, and retail. And we have that coverage in every region. So customers don't have to spend time explaining oil and gas basics, and we're able to immediately jump in and help them solve their business problems. So wrapping up, here's some quick and low risk ways to get started. Back on those 3 approaches that we talked about earlier. If you're interested in migrating your existing instance over, I recommend you check out the SAP Rapid Migration Test Program. You can see a link there. Also, if you're looking to modernize your system to S4 Hana, you can experiment with our SAP Quick Start that I mentioned and deploy in under 1 hour. There's a link there on the presentation for that as well. And then finally, if you're interested in extending your business process, I suggest you work with your account rep to set up a half-day discovery workshop so we can scope out your particular use case you'd like to do a proof of concept around and get started. So that's all we had for today. We'll go ahead and transition to the live Q&A. Jeff, I forgot to mention one rule that we have for today. So if you could take all the hard questions and I will take all the easy ones. We do have some questions that have already come in. You can go ahead and submit additional questions in the question panel. So let's see, Jeff. Let's see, the first one, it looks like this is probably best for you to answer. What size is your ERP database? How large are your systems?
Sure, yeah, that's fine. So our largest ERP at the moment in AWS is 5 terabytes. We're planning to migrate some larger systems up to 20 terabytes later this year. Our largest Hana in-memory database is 6 terabytes currently on scale out. That's growing. We expect to scale that out further this year to 8 terabytes. We're adding warm storage to that, and we're going to add data tiering to reduce memory costs for Hana later in the year.
Okay, great. The next question, how reliable have your systems been in the cloud? I guess that's probably for you as well, Jeff.
Yeah, so that's a question we get asked a lot as well. So the reliability we've seen in AWS has been at least as good as on-premise, probably better. That said, AWS have always been 100% clear that systems can and do fail, and you need to architect to allow for that. So we have a fully resilient architecture in place with high availability and DR. But yeah, the reliability I think has been probably quite a bit better, partly due to the simplification of the architecture, as well as the overall reliability of the AWS platform.
Okay, great. Next question is, what does non-HANA support deadline of 2025 mean? Surely you're not deprecating HANA. I hope not.
So, I think the key answer there is non-HANA, wasn't it? It's the non-HANA
yes.
support deadline of 2025.
Yeah. So HANA is going to remain around for hopefully a long time. So if you do need more information on that, I suggest you reach out to SAP. But what that's referring to is they have set a deadline. So if you're on a non-HANA database like Oracle or DB2, they want everyone to move over from a support standpoint, obviously, to HANA by 2025. Okay, let's see. Next, we've actually got a couple questions around this one. How do you ensure license compliance in the cloud?
Yeah, so obviously it's incredibly important that we stay in compliance with licensing. Now, there are some things to watch out for when you move to the cloud. So some on-premise license structures might not work so well in the cloud. They might restrict the flexibility that you have. For example, if you're licensing by an infrastructure metric, something like cores or sockets or memory, then that might restrict you when you're trying to, when you want to size your systems up or down, or to build systems on demand. So you need to make sure, look at all of your licensing agreements to make sure that that they are compatible with the flexibility you'd like to get. It's also worth checking SAP notes to make sure your hardware and operating system is fully supported. SAP have a list of recommended hardware, and also be aware that some software vendors might have further restrictions on things like which operating system you can use in order to be fully supported. For us, I mean, the architectural simplification that I mentioned, 8 vendors down to 2, that really made things easier for us, because I mean, some of the software we're using historically was licensed by cores or sockets that could have restricted us in the cloud. So by simplifying the architecture, by removing that software from the stack, that made the licensing discussion much easier.
Okay, good. One thing I'll also mention, Jeff, is AWS launched a new product, the AWS License Manager at reInvent. So that makes it easier to manage your licenses in AWS, as well as your on-premises servers. So administrators can create custom licensing rules to emulate the terms of their licensing agreements, and then enforce those rules anytime an instance of EC2 gets launched. So if you're interested in learning more about that service, you can check it out on the AWS website. Okay, let's see, there's more questions. This one's related to security. We're concerned about security in the cloud. What has your experience been, Jeff?
Well, you mentioned security is job number 1. So always a concern. So we've engineered security into the architecture, but the advantage that we have is we can build on top of features that AWS offers as part of the platform. So we have storage encryption, key management. So you're not starting from a base level. So you can build in using the features that AWS are providing. You have to build security into the application layer as well. It's building it all the way through the stack. So it's a combination of the features that you get from AWS and what you do at the application layer.
Okay, good. One of the things I'll also mention is that AWS performs what's called a WellArchitected review. And so what we will do is come in, our solution architects will sit down with our customer teams and to review all the best practices that the AWS and our customers over time have developed. And so the great thing is you know, companies of every size get to benefit from, you know, a lot of the innovations like BP and other larger companies have done. Those best practices are in 4 areas: security, reliability, performance, efficiency, and cost optimization. So, you know, that back on that question we had before around reliability, we have best practices that can help you out there, as well as around the security area. Okay. There's questions, will the presentation be available? Yes, we will have the presentation recording available for replay in a couple of days so that you can share that with other people. Let's see. Jeff, here's a question. What kind of authentication is BP using for your SAP on AWS?
For the SAP application, we use a third-party tool for authentication, so we can get MFA, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Sorry, I'm not so much an application guy. I'm more an infrastructure guy. So, yeah, we certainly use a tool to get MFA, but I forget the name of it. Apologies.
Okay, we can follow up by email on that question. Let's see, there's a question around other industries. Do you have AWS solutions for SAP on other industries? Definitely we do, and you can actually browse by industry on the AWS website. So just go to search for SAP and you can see all of the case studies, as well as partner solutions that have focused on particular industries.
Okay, there's a couple of other interesting questions there. Your hours per month for dev and prod, are you using start-stop automation to save money? Yes, we absolutely are. So by default, non-production systems are shut down outside of working hours, and the working hours depends on the system. Some systems need to be up for more, but by default they're down, I think, outside of 8 AM to 6 PM, Monday to Friday. So we automate that, so we certainly reduce the hours. Production obviously is up all the time, so that does reduce the cost substantially.
Okay, we have another question. Do you have experience in SAP Data Hub for data cleansing and conversion? Do you have any accelerators and templates to help expedite that? We do have experience in that area, and I think it'd be best for me to have you speak with our solution architect that is focused around those extend areas and SAP Data Hub. So Charles, we can follow up with you via email and put you in touch with that individual. Okay, Jeff, do you see any other questions that we're missing?
Well, there's quite a few. Yeah, there's is there any change to the SAP change management process? Well, it gets easier. We can do things more quickly. We still have change management. It's easier to execute because we can be more flexible. So yeah, overall we haven't changed it. It's just got easier to make changes. And there's another question there about, did you have a hybrid architecture? We would have project stacks running in the cloud for a period. How did you manage code and config? Code and config you pretty much manage the same way as we would for a project and production stack on premise. So we wouldn't have, yeah. Sorry,
back on that change management question, I would think the simplification that you talked about of going from 8 vendors down to just 2, probably really simplified change management. Is that accurate?
It did, because you don't have those complex interactions between different pieces of software. You know, you can't upgrade one piece of software because the other piece of software doesn't support that latest version or something like that. So yeah, that certainly simplified change management. And I did see another question further up saying, did we increase our risk by consolidating to 2 vendors? No, I don't think we did. I think we just made things a lot simpler. So I think we decreased our risk. I mean, those 2 vendors would have been in the stack anyway, AWS and SAP. So we haven't increased our risk there. We've reduced it by not having to deal with so many other vendors.
Okay, great. Yeah, good question from Peter on that one. Let's see. I think we've addressed all of the questions here. I'm just scrolling through the pane.
No, a couple more. There's the backup and DRHA strategy. So yeah, we back up essentially to S3. DR and HA is pretty much what you see in the patterns from AWS. So AWS have a set of guidelines, templates that you can use for SAP best practice. So the best thing to do is to look at those and see what works best for you. So we follow best practice. You know, we use the WellArchitected framework that David referred to earlier.
Okay. There's a question, which different SAP solutions are you using?
Yeah, so primarily ERP and BW. We've got BW for Hana, BW on Hana. Lots of different versions of ECC. We're also running SCM, and I think we've got SRM. We've got Solution Manager as well. So yeah, a bunch of different SAP bits of software. Probably most of the SAP versions, I think.
Okay, great. We have a question. Can you explain briefly what Hana is? So,
I mean, very quickly, it's an in-memory database, an in-memory columnar database, so you can do data analysis and transformation much more quickly than you can in a disk-based architecture. That's the very, very quick answer. For the longer answer, yeah, you'd probably refer to Wikipedia or the SAP website.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, that question may refer to some of the branding, maybe, you know, a little confusing at times because you see Hana used and then S4 Hana used. S4 Hana is the new version of the SAP code base compared to ECC.
Yeah, S4 HANA is the new version of ECC and or the evolution or whatever, and BW for HANA is the new version of BW. Yeah.
All right. Here's another one that just came in. How do you deal with people who may be afraid of moving to the cloud? Well, you know, I think by being able to test things very quickly and easily, I think that's from my background, that's the best approach, right? Because you can always have someone that may try to argue, but if you actually stand up those systems, and I talked about some of the tools that we have, if you're migrating, you know, we have the rapid test program where you can just, using your own data, is to stand up a system and see if it works. and let people interact with it. So also we have those capabilities I talked about too if they're new systems. So there's a S4 Hana trial license on the AWS marketplace. So if you want to stand up a new system from scratch, you can do that at no cost. And so I think that's probably the best way to convince people, you know, in your organization around the benefits of the cloud is just to test it and see the benefits yourself. I don't know, Jeff, do you have any other comments around that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think people need to see a benefit from change, don't they? Everyone's resistant to change if they don't understand what the benefit is. So we certainly, I mean, you know, in the early days of the cloud, I was kind of thinking, you know, why would we do this? And we saw that with, you know, system owners, that there would be, why would I move my system to the cloud? What are the benefits? And you know, as we started moving systems to the cloud and we saw the benefits from that, and the system owners would see the benefit that other people were getting in the cloud, then they would start to come to us and say, you know, when can we move my system to the cloud? So it becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling thing when you get some benefits and people start to see them, then they understand why they should, you know, go through that change to move it.
Okay, great. Here's a question around predictive maintenance. So what's the average time it takes to prototype predictive maintenance capabilities for a set of equipment? Do you have templates and best practices around this? So that's a great question. You know, in terms of the time, it really depends. And we see customers that in oil and gas, they take one of two approaches. One approach is that they look for a SaaS predictive maintenance vendor that specializes in this area. We have more startups built on AWS than any other vendor. And so in the predictive maintenance space, our partners include people like Uptake, C3 IoT, Seek is also a partner, and we have many others. So Charles, I can follow up with you, but the advantage of having a SaaS application is running on AWS is that information then can also go into your enterprise data lake. So as I talked before, instead of that data being trapped kind of in another silo of the SaaS provider, you can pull all of that data into your company's operations data lake, along with SCADA systems and historian data, for example. And we also have adapters to those systems. The second approach that we see customers take is they decide that they want to build their own model. And for companies that go down that path, they typically have a data science team in the enterprise, and they want to be able to build a custom solution for their own needs. We've seen companies do that around very complex pieces of equipment. So for example, in oil and gas, around rod pumps, electric submersible pumps. Midstream companies are building models around compression units. There's actually a case study available where TransCanada has done that and pulled data out of their OSI Pi historian into an AWS data lake. And so, lots of options around that. I think, Charles, just follow up with me and we can help guide you through that approach and help you choose which solution would be best for you. So because we do have the email address, the AWS-oil-and-gas at Amazon.com. That alias goes to myself, our head of oil and gas, as well as our technical lead for oil and gas. So if you have any more follow-up questions, feel free to connect via that approach, and we can get you to the appropriate person. Also, we do have all of your emails, and we'll follow up, as I stated before, on questions where you asked for more information in a question pane. And I want to thank everyone for attending today, and we look forward to helping you drive your digital transformation initiatives in oil and gas. And Jeff, I wanted to thank you very much for your time today as well.
No problem, Dave. It's been great fun. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.